So we're going to be painting another leaf, more colourful this time, a Caladium Leaf, beautiful pinks. And I'm trying out my pinks. Opera, beautiful, beautiful bright pink. Trouble is it's a fugitive colour, which means it fades very easily, but a lovely one to use for this leaf. Another pink I have is Quinacridone Magenta. Now that's not going to fade. It's a very strong colour, not as bright pink as the Opera. Alizarin Crimson, slightly warmer, cool pink. And that's a staining colour, maybe a little bit too reddish for this leaf, I think. And I'm going to try out the Permanent Rose. Permanent Rose is one of my favourites. It doesn't stain as much as the Alizarin Crimson, and it's a lovely, cool pink. It's useful for many things, and that's one that I use a lot. And the last one, Rose Madder, is a darker pink, more brownish pink, and probably not useful for this leaf. Now these are the only ones I have, so I'm going to maybe search around and find in the shops, in the art shops, maybe a pink that is like an Opera, bright like an Opera. Maybe there's a Quinacridone Rose that's bright but not fugitive. What I've done is I've mixed the Quinacridone Magenta with the Opera in the hopes that it will help stop the fading. And also this little study of a leaf is going to be in my sketchbook or in my journal, so it's not going to be subject to light damage upon the wall, so I'm not so worried about it. This is a study. You can decide what pink you have that's going to work. The first thing we need to do with this leaf is to wet the whole leaf before putting down the pink layer. Each layer of this leaf has to be dry before you work on the next layer, because you're working with pinks and greens, and you can get daring and work on them all at once, but you risk having the green and the pink mix and form browns and greys. So I've mixed the Quinacridone Magenta with the Opera pink, and I'm putting them onto the wet leaf and letting them bleed into the water. Bleeding into the water will give it a sort of a veiny look. My Opera paint is a good quality. It's Winsor & Newton, so at least that lessens the danger of it fading too much. It's a good quality pigment, but it is one of the known fugitive pigments. I'm putting some little dots of pink. Trouble is, it is just the perfect pink for this leaf. Little dots, because these Caladium leaves have all kinds of dots of white and pink and green and light green and dark green. They're very speckled. Now I've mixed a light green. I've mixed Azo Yellow with tiny bit of Phthalo green. We have to be so careful with the Phthalo green. It is very strong. So just the tiniest touch, and that is going to be the light green on the leaf. And I'm going to go around the edge of the leaf with that. Now I've kept the edge of the leaf dry whilst wetting the rest of the leaf, so the edge will be nice and crisp and a hard edge, and then the green will bleed into where the white and the pink is on the leaf. And because the pink is perfectly dry, you are not going to get a grey or a brown or any of those unpleasant blends happening. And you saw me dab up with my Kleenex there. It was too wet. I wanted to leave some white in that area, so I did a little bit of dabbing. And I'm putting a few dots of green I have the leaf up on my other computer. You need a lot of computers on the go when you do recording on one and reference picture on the other, but I'm looking at it very carefully to see how the leaf is coloured, how it's formed. And the good thing is, even on one plant, every leaf is very different. They have a different amount of pink, different amount of green, different amount of mottling. I was even thinking on some of them that have a lot of white mottling on them, you could put your dark green wash on and then sprinkle with salt, and you would get all that white mottling happening. I didn't do that on this one. It didn't have that sort of look to it, but it's an idea that you could use. And I'm just dabbing with my Kleenex to Get a little bit of the highlights back. Now I've mixed ultramarine in with that light green mix, the one that I had previously mixed with the Azo Yellow and the Phthalo green, and now I've added ultramarine blue, and that's darkened it up, and a little less water so it's more concentrated. And I'm going to put some darker green around the edges and work slowly around. Sometimes I will blend in that green with a wet brush and soften the edge. I did hope I didn't dry the light green. I just hoped that I could work on the light green while it was still wet, but it dried before I could do that, which is always the way. If you want it to stay wet, it doesn't. If you want it to dry, it seems to take forever. And I mixed a slightly darker green by adding a little bit of the Quinacridone Magenta to the green mix to darken it up. And I'm doing the edge with a very dark green as it goes away from you. The blue added to the green will help to push it away from you, and the pink will pull it towards you. Now I have a few of my green mixes here. The first one is the Azo Yellow and Phthalo green, which is very heavy on yellow. That's the light green that I used first. And the second one is that green, the Azo Yellow with the Phthalo green, and then I've added ultramarine to darken it up and cool it down. When you add a blue, that cools it down. And the third one, I've added some Quinacridone Magenta to that green to add the complement to grey it down and darken it up. And then under that, I'm actually experimenting. Under that, I'm going to experiment with a strong mix of just Quinacridone Magenta and Phthalo green. I got a very, very dark grey with those two mixes. I'm making a little note of what I did there. I usually try, although I don't always show you, I would usually try and put all my mixes on a piece of cheaper watercolour paper. I use my cheaper watercolour paper to mix on, just to see what colours I'm going to get before I do my final painting. I'm adding a little bit of the Azo Yellow to that, but it's not mixing very well on the paper. I'm adding a little bit more of that green and watering it down. Definitely very, very grey. So you need to be careful. The one above it, where I've just added a little bit of the Quinacridone Magenta, is a nice soft green, but these ones are a little bit harsh, a little bit dark. And you can see they don't wash back very easily. I haven't dried them, but they've stained into the paper very quickly. And that's because Phthalo green and the Quinacridone Magenta are heavy staining colours, very pigmented colours. The Phthalo green is made by M. Graham, made with honey, beautiful paints, and the Quinacridone Magenta is made by Core, made by Golden. So I've got the Quinacridone Magenta, and I've mixed some permanent rose with it to do the darker veins of the leaf. And if you wanted to cool that colour down, you could add cobalt blue to cool it down to a more violet colour, or you could add a touch of the green that you've mixed. That would also cool it down and make a darker colour. Always use your complement if you can. It makes the most beautiful dark colour if you can use the complementary colour. I'm using my rigger brush to pull these veins very carefully and lightly along the leaf. And some of them have a bit of a branch at the end of the vein. And I'm very, very gently with my brush adding a little bit of detail, a few branches that go around to the edge of the leaf, and some shadow and some dots. And when you get to this stage of the leaf and you have the main colours on, your main pink and your main greens, that's when you can start to add a few more details. I'm going to add some deeper shadows to the centre of the leaf using the same mixture I used for the veins, the Quinacridone Magenta with the permanent rose, but I'm using a bit of water with it and spreading it out from the centre of the leaf to make shape to the leaf now, to curve it upwards from the centre and give it a bit more depth of colour too. You saw how much the colour faded when it dried. It went much, much lighter than that beautiful bright pink I had to start with. And you can add different, if you have different pinks, if you want to add a little bit of rose madder, if you want to add a little bit of alizarin crimson and a few different pinks to different areas of the leaf, and go right ahead. And you may not have the colours I have, so just experiment with the colours that you have and see if you can mix something similar. Big problem with pink or red is that it's a primary colour, so sometimes you have to buy it in the tube because you cannot mix that colour. You simply have to buy it, especially colours that are really bright like the quinacridones and the opera. Now I'm getting to the fiddly stage of the leaf now where I spend a lot of time just fiddling, and I want to put a shadow underneath to make it look even more three-dimensional. So I have mixed with my cobalt, mixed a little bit of rose. Thank you for watching.